Delighted to be joined here by Aaron. We've just had our last advisory board meeting before tech. Aaron, I'll just let you introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Aaron Gabbard. I'm co-founder and CEO at Bloom & Wild. Bloom & Wild is an online flower company. We're Europe's largest and fastest growing direct-to-consumer flower brand.
Great. So Aaron, you're obviously on our advisory board. You've been instrumental in building out tech. Why do you think tech is such a landmark event?
It seems like there are a lot of conferences nowadays, but this seems to be the one to be at in terms of caliber of speakers, in terms of internationalness of the agenda, and in terms of really finding the innovators globally that are driving the intersect of tech and retail forward.
Which speakers are you most excited to hear from?
I'm really excited that you are bringing people over from the US, from Stitch Fix and Rent the Runway. They're two of the companies that I find super interesting in terms of use of AI personalization to really drive retail forward using tech. So brilliant to see them represented.
Great. Why do you think retailers should attend tech?
I think nowadays every company is a tech company. Of course, you might be a retail company or a bank, but tech is such a big source of competitive advantage for companies that I think putting that into a retail context, every retail company should be thinking about how it can use tech to drive competitive advantage. And you guys have brought together a set of speakers that are the forefront of that thinking. So it feels remiss for a retailer not to be there.
Absolutely. In terms of so you've spoken a little bit about speakers that you're excited about tech. In terms of themes, are there any themes that form the tech program that you are particularly relevant for you or that you're particularly excited about?
We talked at the advisory board meeting earlier this morning about culture as a theme, which I was really pleased to see represented, because I think there's a lot of discussion at conferences like this about the what and not so much discussion about the how. And ultimately, every business is reliant on a group of people and getting those people excited and fired up to do what needs to be done. Yeah. We think about that a huge amount at Bloom & Wild, and we invest really heavily in thinking proactively about our culture and our values. So trying to bring together people who are leading the thinking in that dimension at a much bigger scale than companies like us are at is really exciting. And I think complements some of the, let's say, hard skills around the latest thinking in AI, et cetera, really nicely.
Absolutely. And in terms of culture, who at Bloom & Wild kind of drive that? Is there a particular department, or where should that come from? Where should the kind of culture piece come from?
I'm responsible for culture as CEO, and I see it as one of my most important jobs, and I see myself as a custodian of the sort of careful eggshell or whatever you want to describe it as, that's our culture, that needs to be nurtured and protected as we grow and not sort of shattered or fragmented. Lots of people help me. There are brilliant culture creators through the organization. They're not necessarily in any one department. A lot of them tend to be people who've been with us for longer, and I find that they both have a better understanding of the nuance of our culture because of their length of tenure with us, and a greater sense of pride of ownership around really keeping our culture brilliant. So it's a joint effort, but I feel like I need to personally lead it, and I think everybody on the team looks for me to be that cultural leader.
Absolutely. What will people get at tech that they won't get elsewhere?
I mentioned a little earlier that you have been looking internationally and even intercontinentally for your speakers. Mm-hmm. That's really struck me when working on the agenda, the advisory board, that there has been an effort to look globally for people who are really driving thinking forward. I know I've mentioned AI a couple of times, but it just really stands out as an example. And I think often at other conferences, you get people who are sort of UK household names or companies that are UK household names, but it's rare that that extends to global household names and to not just people representing UK divisions of companies, but HQ of those companies where a lot of the innovation is going on. And that seems to be quite specific to tech versus the conference landscape.
Great. There's an increasing challenge, albeit opportunity, nowadays to meet consumer needs faster, cheaper, and better. How have you adapted your business model to kind of satisfy this demand?
Yep. We're constantly looking at how we can change our business process and logistical arrangements to do so. One example that I'd call out is we have worked with Royal Mail to be their first customer on a pilot scheme, which allows them to, where they collect from our studio at 11 p.m. For nationwide next day delivery or quasi-nationwide next day delivery. There are a few particularly remote areas that are excluded. And this is now a program that they've rolled out to a few other retailers, but still a very small number. We're really proud to have been that first partner for Royal Mail on an initiative like this. And I guess it's a combination of being able to iterate rapidly on the technology and processes that are required for us to be able to support that, because they had requirements from us as well. It's a two-way thing. And also really investing in relationships. I think as a small company, we have a disproportionate amount of sense of ownership each. And so people really go the extra mile beyond just their day jobs and think about how they can develop relationships further with key suppliers like Royal Mail or partners or customers. And that's enabled us to certainly to get product to customers faster. If a customer's ordering at 9:30 p.m., then they can, or 10 p.m., they can order for next day rather than the day after, while doing it relatively cost effectively. Royal Mail's national scale means that they're a cost-effective distribution partner compared to others. So having that culture of innovation and looking for ways to respond to customer feedback around, expectations for rapidity of delivery, and then working with partners to deliver it, feels like an advantage that we can have as a scale-up that a larger, more process-oriented company might not be able to have.
So I want to pick up a bit on the partnership piece. What do you think makes an ideal partnership?
I think ideal partnership has a couple of elements. I think there needs to be genuine win-win for both partners in it. So to look at this Royal Mail example, I think for them, they're trying to differentiate in a crowded delivery carrier landscape, and they do have a huge scale advantage and network advantage that they can use to achieve that. So for them, it's thinking about how to use that to develop unique customer propositions that others can't offer. I think from our perspective, we're looking to serve our customers with increased convenience at low cost. So it's in both of our interests to find a way of extending cut-off time and therefore increasing delivery convenience for customers. And I think those sorts of partnerships are always more effective than when Company A does Company B a favor with a hope that Company B will repay Company A in the future. So that's one element. I think the other element is that there's a partnership between companies is always a partnership between two individuals or between two groups of individuals as well. And if people feel really empowered, I can't speak so much for the Royal Mail side, but on our side, the person who led this initiative is constantly looking for ways to drive our operations forward to the next level, and has two of our values are pride and innovation at Bloom & Wild. And this person really sort of embraces both of those values and is looking for ways to implement them. And I think where you have people behind partnerships at companies that think in that way, then that tends to be the sort of catalyst to making those partnerships really happen.
Yeah. So from Bloom & Wild's perspective, obviously creating convenience for the customer, it seems to me pretty much at the heart of everything that you do. So I want to kind of pick up on the tech sprint theme, because of course, how can retailers create convenience for the customer is the theme of the tech sprint. Do you have any tips for the teams that are going to be entering that? Any tips at all on what kind of end product you'd like to see from that, or how they should approach it?
We do hack days once or twice a year at Bloom & Wild. We give people a bit less than 24 hours. So I actually think 24 hours is a decent amount of time. I know it feels like a short amount of time. But if you focus on a really specific problem that you're trying to solve, and remember that this doesn't need to be a fully productionized solution, it just needs to be enough of a solution to excite the judges and be the winner, and then further development can take place beyond a sprint. So I think that's really important to remember. The other thing that I'd advise is, even with as little as 24 hours, or at Bloom & Wild hack days in as little as 6 to 8 hours, the teams that tend to win are teams that use some of that very limited time to do some real consumer research in order to be really sort of targeted in the solution that they're building. So use some of that 24 hours for some members of the team to go out of the venue and chat to real customers, get feedback on the proposed solution, or dig into a pain point a bit more and use that to guide the problem that you're solving. Because often problems that people think are really exciting to solve in a sort of sprint context aren't the actual problem that is the real consumer need.
That's a really good point, actually. You have said that the UK startup scene is coming up with brilliant innovations, especially in consumer. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think people associate a lot of the direct-to-consumer movement with the US and with companies like Warby Parker or Harry's Dollar Shave Club. I can list many others. And I think there is a lot of excitement in that US scene. But I think against the odds, given the sort of much smaller population and domestic market we have here, there's a cohort of companies here in the UK, of which I think Bloom & Wild is at the heart of, but there are others like Gusto or Graze, and then more up-and-coming ones like Pasta Evangelists, Cornerstone, that are, I think, this next generation of D2C companies that are really excelling and doing so without having that huge domestic market and without, in many cases, having the levels of funding that our US counterparts are able to have. And because it's a smaller domestic market, we're forced to think internationally more quickly in many cases, which I think sets a high bar. But if you solve that early on, then it gives you this huge addressable market, actually much bigger than a US company would have, because a lot of US scale-ups don't think international until very late. Warby Parker still has not internationalized at all, for example, and it's nearly 10 years in. And I think that's that combination of great investor and sort of scale-up scene here in London, fact that we do have English language, and that sort of means that we can attract teams of people from beyond the UK that speak English to build the best teams. And then that push to go international relatively early, be it to Europe or to the US, so creating a really exciting ecosystem to maybe not be at the level that we're seeing in the US, but certainly to be on the same trajectory.
Really, really interesting. I want to come back to the culture piece as well, again, because obviously you've spoken about culture being such an important thing within the organization. I'm a customer of Bloom & Wild as well, and recently I got an email through, well, two actually, one before Mother's Day and one before Father's Day, to ask if I wanted to opt out of that email, which I was quite overwhelmed, to be honest, because I've never had a retailer kind of approach me in that quite sensitive kind of way as well. So obviously culture is something that you have internally, but also kind of externally as well. Who kind of comes up with ideas like that?
Yeah, that specific idea came from Em, Lucy, and Joe, who are on our retention team. So, but ideas can come from a number of different places. I think the genesis of that idea is that people are trusting us with their emotions as an online flower company. And people don't order from us all the time, but when they do order from us, it's outsourcing a really important expression of emotion to us. And so we need to be sensitive in how we interact with our customers, more than if we were selling pencils. And I think it's really important that we remember that. So as a result, we're quite sort of attuned to feedback from customers and when we don't do things right. And in previous years, we've had customers respond to marketing around Mother's Day in particular, which is the busiest time of the year for us, saying, I'd really rather not receive your emails because Mother's Day is a difficult time for me for whatever good reason. And so this year we thought, can we be proactive rather than reactive, which has a huge benefit to customers, that they see that we're thinking sensitively. It also has a benefit to us, because it means that rather than customers unsubscribing altogether from our email, they instead sort of resubscribe after the Mother's Day period. And actually we can then personalize our communications in future. So actually next year we won't even need to ask those customers who opted out whether they want to opt out of Mother's Day, because they've already told us they want to opt out of Mother's Day. So we can build that into segmentation and be even more customer-centric in future and start to build up a profile of what's relevant to customers. So we talked a bit about sort of what a good partnership is. This is a valuable two-sided partnership between us and our customers, where we're doing the right thing by them and we're also better able to serve them in future, which is good for the way that we run our business. So I think, but at the hub of it, at the sort of root of it, we we need to be super aware of customer feedback and use that to drive decisions. And culturally, the way that we achieve this is that we all do customer delight multiple times a year. So we don't, our customer delight team sits in our office, and they're really central to what we do. Everybody does a day of customer delight in their first week at the company. And then at peak times and ideally other times throughout the year, we expect every single person in the company to be on email, phone, chat, whatever it is, to our customers. And putting that at the heart of our business process, I think, makes us all aware of how to, read and gather customer feedback and use that to inform decisions that we're making, in a function like CRM in this case, or many other functions as well.
It's really, really interesting. Thank you. Let's kind of turn the discussion back to tech with a capital T again. So what does tech mean for you in one word?
Excitement. I think, should I elaborate?
Yeah, please do, yeah.
I think, I've said this in different ways during this chat, but there are a lot of conferences out there, and, you could spend your whole working year going to them, and obviously you can't because there's lots of other stuff going on back at the office and you're busy and whatever. So in order to really stand out in that landscape, I think a conference needs to have some highlights to it that make people feel I'm going to take time out of my really busy schedule in the case of many attendees to go to this, and so it needs to sort of be exciting to people, and it feels like the agenda that you guys have put together sort of has that excitement and wow factor that that's often missing.
Great. All right, Aaron, thank you so much.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Rebecca.
you.
Yep.